Okay, so before we start talking about here, so let's talk about a few different things that are happening in the great state of California. So a few years ago, right, there was a Supreme Court decision, so SCOTUS, who made this declaration that California prison numbers had to go down. They had to do it because there was a lot of overcrowding issues that were happening to a point where the California prison systems were seen as inhumane, and the Supreme Court makes issues out a reason that because of this, right, because there's inhumane conditions, people aren't being served correctly. It's a violent, dangerous kind of place. There's also the incidents as well that there are violations of the Prison Rape Elimination Act going on in place as well, that things need to change in the state of California with respect to prisons, right? So this creates this imperative in a court-ordered mandate for the state of California to dramatically reduce the number of inmates. So there was a variety of measures that were put into place in the first place, right? So one, of course, is AB 109. AB 109, is a measure that treated certain offenses differently, so they didn't necessarily have to go into prison anymore, right? So it was called like a Realignment Act. So anyone who is convicted of a less serious felony, so these are going to be things to they're going to be like property related crimes, right? Serious stuff goes in, but what ends up happening for less serious felonies, right, is that people serve their time in local jails. So rather than getting sent to state-run prisons, right? So if you were convicted of a crime in LA County and it was some sort of like property crime offense, you, instead of going to state prison, you would instead serve that sentence in LA County's jail, or one of the jails, right? The other part that kind of comes up that is part of it, right, is that there was also a reclassification of crimes. And this was operated under Prop 47. So there's this influx of people coming in from prisons that are going to local jails, right? And there's also a redefinition then of certain crimes where crimes that were previously felonies are now seen as misdemeanors. And so this is going to be things, like shoplifting values of a certain amount, Grand Theft Auto, receiving stolen property, forgery, fraud, bad checks, and so on, right? So these are now going to be treated as misdemeanors rather than felonies, right? So this, was done to accomplish, a couple different things, right? So these are different statutes. And what ends up happening is that this relieves a lot of pressure on the state prison system. But there's a reciprocal effect where there's now increased pressure on local jails. So if we visualize this, like this kind of relationship, right, is that when we think about jails, so these are run by the county, and these are used, where people are held pretrial if they don't qualify for bail for some reason. So if we have a jail, and then we have a prison. So the prison holds people who commit felonies and have to serve prison sentences that are greater than 1 year. So what was happening under this old system, right, is that there were a lot of people coming from jail. There was like a big pressure to be tough on crime for several years. And they would divert all these different people into the prison system, right? So they say, okay, you have to go to prison. But due to this court order from the Supreme Court that the state of California had to reduce its prison population, the prisons through AB 109 is sending people back to serve the rest of their time in jail. And we also see that people who were previously coming into jail that may have qualified as prisons, right? We also see some Prop 47 people are coming back. So what ends up happening is that counties who are, maybe like really aggressive with, prosecuting some crimes, are really aggressive in sending a lot of people to prison for a variety of crimes, are now seeing them come back. They have to deal, with the after effects of this, right? So jails are getting swamped because prisoners that were previously held or would have qualified for prison now have to manage that population. So this creates a problem because if we think about like a court system or like a jail system, right? Jails and law enforcement, are very much based on this idea, right? That there need to be consequences to actions. And at the same time, if we decide that consequences matter and that this needs to be taken care of, right, we still have to manage and issue punishment while grappling with like a new population with the delta change in population. So this process is happening, right, where we see this kind of effect going on where there's now this new pressure into it, right? So, of course, there are a couple strategies that are available to this, right? So one would be to stop prosecuting certain people, which is possible, and some counties, probably did that, right? We could, just jail people and hold them in jail, for the rest of their prison term. So if you have, a 20-year sentence, you have to spend 20 years in a jail rather than going to a prison. Counties aren't really motivated to do this because there's a lot of money involved in doing that. Because when you assume the care of someone for several years, right, you have to pay for their food, you have to pay for their medical bills, you have to pay for dental if you're a state agency. Or if you're a local agency. State government is in a better place to handle that. They also have the resources to do that. But in the local jail, you're less likely to do that. You're more likely to have less money to do that because you're not aggregating money from a lot of different sources. And if you're unable to provide care for an inmate, you open yourself up to a lawsuit because you're providing inhumane conditions inside your jail. So this is not really good either as an option, but it is something that could happen. The third option that is probably more often used and seen as like a big influx then is to implement the use of probation as a sentence. So what we'll focus on today, or in this series of videos, right, is to focus on probation, what it is, how it is, why it's important to use, how relevant it is, it's used, and kind of things like that. And so we'll kind of like talk about more about why it's attractive to the state of California to do this, and why there's going to be a huge increase in probation and probably probation related jobs for several years to come in the state.